In this episode, it was a huge pleasure to spend time with Glen Farrelly, a highly experienced and very successful sales leader who's driven high growth in organisations such as Nortel, Avaya, Blackberry and Sabio, where he was VP Group Sales. I often talk with new sales managers whose aim is to retire before I'm 50. Well, Glen actually achieved this. But although he could, he hasn't actually retired, being involved in multiple private business ventures and still consulting and coaching for a few selected clients. As in most episodes, we cover a wide range of topics. Glen's is a very personal journey, and it was fascinating to hear how his life experiences as a very successful sportsperson and his early career in sales provided a very firm foundation for future success. And then in management and leadership positions, how he constantly looked to improve his knowledge and skills, taking every opportunity to adapt, develop and learn from experience. His lessons are invaluable for aspiring new and developing sales managers. Enjoy. So Glen, thanks ever so much for finding the time. I know you've got a busy schedule, but finding the time to come on this episode. We're going to talk about sales management in general, but I always like to start off with just a standard question, which is just for you to describe kind of your journey, how you got into sales management, what it's been.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for asking me to come on. So my journey, I listened to a couple of the other podcasts.
Okay.
And I think all of us lost souls in sales leadership all have a similar answer here, that none of us really set out to do this.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about reflecting on, okay, well, why did I end up into this situation I found myself in? And there's so many echoes as you look back right the way to a very young age that I think stand out for me. Yeah. Like a lot of people, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was at school. We moved around a lot, which meant I had the kind of first kid in school bullying and all that kind of stuff going on, which, I think is character building, shall we say.
Oh, okay.
We'll probably come back to that, I'm sure, at some point. I think I was really into sport. I'm a big guy, and always loved playing sport. And I think that saved me in some respects. I think it taught me an awful lot of discipline. I was thinking about it the other day. I was thinking, I wasn't a particularly model young man as a teenager, right? So I got into a few scrapes here and there. And,
right.
I think sport teaches you that, something you love and you want to do, you have to abide by the rules.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're sent off or you're dismissed or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And when you're playing a sport that you love and you get in trouble in a situation, you never see anyone happy to leave the field. Nobody ever goes, oh, I hope the ref saw that, So you're all, whoever you are, whether you're a good kid, bad kid, whatever, you'll want to carry on doing what you're doing because you love it. And when someone takes it away from you, it's a really hard lesson that that's gone now. And unless you behave yourself, you're not gonna get it back. So I represented my country as a school kid, playing football. So a lot of accountability at that age, a lot of learning discipline, and I think I then went into a million jobs like everyone else. I was a window cleaner, I was a barman, I was an electrician. I restrung tennis rackets for tennis professionals.
Right.
I cleaned the floors of Sainsbury's. You name it, I did it. And actually the cleaning stuff. So I was at college at that point, but I was waking up at 3:30. I was in this because you have to obviously clean things like supermarkets before people go shopping, right? So
Right.
I was in the
Okay.
supermarket at 4 a.m. scrubbing floors. I then went to college, did my
Yeah.
courses, and then I went back and worked in the evening as well.
Right.
And as I don't know what I was, 18, 19-year-old, I'm probably earning
Yeah.
about £400 a week at that point. So I'm, the richest kid in college.
Okay.
And I just figured out very young, if you work really hard, you can earn lots of money, and when you earn lots of money, you can have all these nice things which you want as a kid.
Right.
There's two or three lessons there just in the sort of formative teenage years there, like I look back on now and think, they certainly molded me into a
Yeah.
sales area.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I actually got, I worked so hard, I got glandular fever at 19. So that knocked me out for about a year.
Right.
I took me out of college. I dropped out of college, had to drop out of college. Couldn't do
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
for about a year. And so that was a lesson in itself as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then after that, I went back and I got a job at Pizza Hut,
Yeah.
loading pizzas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but bizarrely, I think maybe something to do with the sport. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a bigger guy. I don't know. But
Yeah.
having only been there a few months, they asked me to run the store. So I became
Okay.
a manager of a store.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, most of these, if you go around to any pizza place in the country, they're typically behind the scenes. There's typically some 20-something behind the scenes there. There's not a 50-year-old exec running
Right.
these
Yeah.
places, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a fantastic place to learn how a
Yeah.
business operates.
Right.
And I was doing that at the age of 20. Um, but I was working evenings, weekends.
Yeah.
So as you do at that age, I just chucked it in. Didn't want to do that anymore. Didn't have another job.
Okay. All right.
But I started doing temping,
Right.
which I'm not sure temping exists too much nowadays in the way it used to. But
Well, it's a fractional job, isn't it? Apparently.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you used to turn up at the temping agency or get a phone call, and they say, well, this week you're doing this.
Oh, okay.
And you'd just be sent off to go and work somewhere for a week. And I ended
Yeah.
up, long story, but I ended up working in an IT distributor, one of the biggest in the country at the time.
Oh, okay.
And when I say working, I was packing boxes in the warehouse over the summer.
Oh,
Um,
right.
but this warehouse had, it was at the time of what they term value added distribution.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this industry, you had a distributor and then a partner, a retailer. I
Yeah.
know you know this, Steve, but just for the
No.
listeners.
Just yeah. Yeah.
So I turned up at this distributor, and they're trying to differentiate the fact that they're keeping boxes in the warehouse the same as the other two or three big distributors. So they
Yeah.
started adding value-added services. And
Okay.
this little company called Cisco had just started making these things called routers at the time,
Oh,
which allowed people to have internet access, which was all very new.
yeah.
And what they were doing was, so they were taking these routers and putting some software on them before they went to out the door to the customers.
Right. Okay.
And I had an interest in that, and they promoted me from packing boxes to putting some software on these routers.
Okay.
And from there, that department, obviously this is such a boom time, right? So everything
Yeah. Yeah.
grew, and I just grew with it. And that department became a returns and repairs department. Then that
Right.
absorbed customer services. And somewhere in that journey, the same thing happened. Someone looked at me and said, well, you're doing quite good at this. Would you like to run it? And in fact, I remember the moment that happened. They had it's quite an interesting story. They had so we were dealing with returns. Stuff would go out to
Okay.
customers, and then it would come
Yeah.
back if it was faulty or
Yeah.
they didn't want it anymore. And at the time, this distributor just put the box on the shelf and hoped they'd deal with it later. They'd maybe used to be able to get it back on a stock rotation.
Okay.
But this shelf of boxes had got up to a value of about £1 million at that point. And main issue
Right.
with this was the manufacturers didn't want you to send this stuff back to them because it had been broken, damaged, pulled apart. So in my spare time, I figured out if you rang up the manufacturers and said, "Oh, I've got one of these, but box is damaged," they'd send you a new box, and they'd probably charge you £1.
Okay.
But some of these boxes were worth £10,000. So
Right.
I took the time and wrote, this is, even almost pre-email day, got on the phone, sent letters to these manufacturers, said, "I've got some of these,
Yeah.
the box is damaged, can I have a new box? Can I have a new part?"
Okay.
And basically this £1 million pool of useless boxes on the shelf, I turned into cash for the company. And
Right.
the MD at the time, it was a nice surprise for him at his end of year. He had no idea I was doing this. Um,
What a
and I
nice
think
surprise. Yeah.
that's quite a nice surprise. And I think that's the point at which they said, "Thank you, Glenn. We have no idea what you've been doing, but thank you very much. And would you like a couple of people and carry on doing it, please?"
Right.
And that was my first taste of management. I guess
Oh,
just being
okay.
given a couple of people to work for me
Yeah.
who I asked to do the same thing as I'd been doing.
That's a fantastic story. But I mean, you make it sound as though it kind of just happened and you kind of fell into it. You're in the right place at the right time. But obviously, I mean, even going back to Pizza Hut when they said, "Can you manage, this outlet?" I mean, you could
Yeah,
have said no. Most people would have said no. I'm quite happy. Yeah, I don't need the extra little, tiny bit of money I was going to get for doing that. You could have said no. And in the disty, you could have just got on with your job and and done it. But
yeah.
you threw yourself into it, and then things happen.
Well,
It's
yeah, and I think that's where when you do start to reflect, as you do, you're thinking you're going to come and have a chat with you, and you start to think, well, why did I do this? Why did I end up in this? Which you
yeah,
don't often think about. I do look back to some of those formative years.
yeah,
The hard work equals reward, even from
yeah,
just cleaning floors. Figuring that out as a teenager at college.
yeah,
Um, I used to arrive early to school. I was quite a keen basketball player as well as a teenager. I used to arrive
right,
early and run a basketball club for the younger kids, and
okay,
I enjoyed watching them. I enjoyed coaching them and enjoyed seeing them develop and enjoyed seeing
right,
them do well.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so looking back, I had maybe a bit of strength of character from going through some tough times and moving around and getting
yeah,
the rough end of what teenagers can be like at that age.
yeah,
I figured out I enjoy coaching and seeing other people develop, and the kids I was working with at the basketball, seeing that happen.
yeah, yeah,
I'd learned discipline through the sport side of things,
yeah,
and I'd figured out hard work generally equals reward. So there's
yeah.
four components there that I learned between the ages of 11 and I guess 20 that really kind of formed some of those early decisions and
Right.
probably did make me think, well, hang on a minute, I can do something about those boxes sat there if I just stay on for
Yeah,
another
yeah,
hour
yeah,
tonight and do a little bit more
yeah.
work. Yeah.
But it
Uh,
sounds as though, I mean, you didn't have a plan. You didn't write down, I want to be a manager. But it's that, and it's amazing because talking to other leaders, uh, your story's probably a little bit more extreme than most, but
yeah.
it is about those characteristics that we have, um, rather than a particular skill, but
Yeah.
working hard, getting a kick out of coaching people,
Yeah.
uh, discipline, those kind of things seem
Yeah.
to be really important.
But
Um,
I haven't actually mentioned sales as well. So, because this is all kind of before the age of 21, I think.
right.
But I mentioned this company was IT distributor, and having set up this department and it becoming, returns, then customer service. I actually then did in the last year I was working in that department. They gave me a load of bad debt.
Okay.
So where something had gone wrong with a sale,
Yeah.
and a company owed us money, they just, because I'd had so much experience of basically anything behind sales at that
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
they said, "Well, here's a load of bad debt. Go and figure it out for us." And that was a fantastic time because every case was individual. Every case was different. Sometimes you
Yeah.
you'd actually err on the side of the person who didn't want to pay the company I was working for, which was really interesting because you could see that they were in the right more than we were. I was going to not halt, but certainly arbitratory meetings at that point, and I'm still only 21. So that was a fascinating time.
Right.
But I also got to the point where I said to the MD,
and direct face-to-face
I've done enough of
involvement.
this. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So face-to-face with clients, and even though it was often in difficult circumstances. And so I got to the point where I was bored, and I actually went to the MD and resigned. I had a habit of resigning without another job to go to at this point. And he turned around and said, well, look, why don't you try this thing called sales? And for me at that point, all I'd done for the prior 2 years was clean up the mess after salespeople, right? I'd done customer service, returns, bad debt chasing, which often was on the back of a bad deal structure. And I just thought, these salespeople are the bane of my life. I don't want to have anything to do with them.
Right.
So the idea of going into sales horrified me. But he said, look, just try it. He was a great MD. He said, give it a go. And of course, as you probably expect now, looking with the experience, what happened is I went into sales and I found it so easy because I'd done everything behind and I knew the consequences of my actions right from the very first conversation with the client. And I fell into it very easily. There was a great lesson here. I think I mentioned this to you, but we've talked about this before. Back in those days, the distribution sales floors were so full of energy, right? Absolutely just brilliant, buzzing environments. It's boom time. You had manufacturers offering you cars for the weekend if you were the top sales guy that week. And they were, generally speaking, back then very much, or certainly where I was working, very much 50-50 male to female. And I'm a young 20-something man, and I want to look good in front of the girls, right? And these were smart ladies. Often the top salespeople on that sales floor were the women, and they did not give the time of day to any guy who was not a top performer. It was a great lesson to me that it didn't matter what you looked like, it didn't matter what chat you had. If you live and die by your number, and it all became great banter on the sales floor, but it also became absolutely laser focused on it doesn't matter whether you're good looking, got the chat. If you're bottom of that sales leaderboard, you're going home with your tail between that legs, with your legs at the end on a Friday. So everybody just live and die by their number, and I stand by that today. An individual contributor, a sales manager, a CRO. It doesn't matter all the fluff around the sides. If you're not delivering the number, no one's going to really give you too much time a day.
I mean, we often talk on the podcast around, the number is the result of what you do as a manager, which, we can talk about that, but it is the number. That's why you are there. If I talk to CEOs or managing directors and ask them what they expect of their sales managers, the first thing they always say is, well, they've got to deliver a number because that's what the business needs, and it is easy to forget that sometimes. So what happened then, Glenn?
I obviously performing well at distributor, you get noticed by the manufacturers that sell through the distributor. So I was poached into a manufacturer, which was Nortel at the time. Which I'm sure you remember. And Nortel were great in terms of, I think it was the first time I'd actually been invested in. So firstly, that happened in two ways. Firstly, I found myself surrounded by some incredible people, 2 or 3 people that you've already had on your podcast, but also I had a Scottish manager who people listening will remember. He passed away, but a tremendous impact on my career and myself as a person. And I was very fortunate at that point to be surrounded by good people, but it also taught me the lesson that you should always be surrounded by good people. And this particular Scottish manager that I worked for had been there and done it all. So he'd come up through the ranks. He'd done sales, then sales, middle management, gone on to sales leadership, and I learned more from a QBR with him than I did on any 2-week training course. Now that's not to say I didn't get a lot out of the training courses. There were some fantastic training courses, and goodness me, it helped develop me an awful lot. But the impact of having a great coach at that point in my career was huge. And I was thinking about it before I came on this call. But what was it about him?
Okay.
And I know this leads to a question you often ask people. I think one of the key things about him was because he had been there and done it. He had a fabulous bullshit detector. So forecast calls, QBRs, conversation at the water cooler. He would because he'd been there and done it. He'd absolutely understand where you were wavering from, the absolute honest line, and he'd call you out on it every single time. And if he didn't call you out on it, he understood why you might be saying that, and he would maybe cut you a break, but he knew exactly what was going on anyway. And it just learned so much. And for me, I think I know you often ask the question of, can you be a great sales leader, whether you've done the job or not? For me, that gentleman in particular showed me that he had an extra bit about him because of the fact he'd done it, and he just knew every trick in the book.
And I think, there's general agreement that if you haven't done it, it's incredibly difficult to add that kind of value as a sales manager. As you say, to just instinctively know when people are kidding themselves or trying to kid you. It's it's incredibly difficult if you haven't had that experience. So it sounds as though
he used to talk about. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
He used to talk about three truths. Salespeople have 3 truths. They have what they think the customer believes. They have what they believe is going to happen. And then they have what they want their sales manager to believe. And he said, the reality often flips between the 3. And that's just something that stuck with me. I think, often a sales guy will believe something's happening with a customer when it's not. The reality is maybe slightly different. And then they'll have something that they're telling you as a sales leader, which is slightly different to that. And I think, helping a salesperson to be transparent and honest about all those 3 is part of being a good leader, for my opinion.
Okay, so I love that phrase, helping them to understand, because some salespeople are very conscious. They will play a game with the sales manager. Often it's just very unconscious. I want to believe what the customer's saying. I maybe gloss some things for the sales manager, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really do anybody any good. Because it's about reality.
I think that and you're spot on, because actually sometimes as a manager, the best thing you can do is get out of the way, right? And so it's pointless it can be pointless asking your salesperson to replicate the information they're already in control of. They're already repeated once already. So I think sometimes a salesperson will condense information or strip back information because it's the 3rd time they've said it, been asked to say it, etc. So there is a often rationale around where the reality is versus those 3 truths. But I think the key thing that particular leader taught me was understanding where the three truths are and the reality against them is as much as having to actually intervene and do something about it. You don't always
Right.
have to intervene.
No. But you have to understand.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And has that changed over the years, do you think? Because I'm thinking particularly, we have conversations around the impact. Yeah, everybody's got Salesforce, implemented. There's data everywhere. We can look at
Yeah.
buyer intent and stuff through Navigator. But so has that changed, that whole dynamic of, what the truth is?
I don't think it has. I think in many respects that the industry hasn't reacted to it very well, in my opinion.
Okay.
Me and you have had a few conversations about I'm a big believer in salespeople need to sell.
Yeah.
And, having a salesperson repeat information into a CRM that's got a wonderful AI engine now that can predict you where your quarter's going to finish very, very closely, to then have them join a forecast call, to then have a middle manager repeat the same information up to their CRO or sales leader or CEO, to then have that person then scrutinize it. There's a huge amount of repeating of information there that I particularly think we can, as an industry, do a better job of.
For sure.
But there's those three truths that exist. Unfortunately, I think because we probably haven't reacted well enough, they probably still do.
Yeah. And there's a lot of game playing still going on. Oh, okay. So So I'm kind of getting the story and how you ended up as
I wanted to talk about training.
Leader. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I kind of brushed over the training there, and actually the development I got at Nortel was phenomenal. It's where we first met, but I was sent away to another country to do a week on TAS training. I think in my first couple of weeks I was doing features and benefits training, which was awesome. And I still have to remind some salespeople about that. The difference of a feature and a benefit nowadays. It was really, really interesting time for me because I'd been reasonably successful as a salesperson, but I didn't know why.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, someone gives you this reference book or even a reference library that you can suddenly start to come back to and understand, okay, that did work for me because of this, and this.
Right.
And it just really helped me so much in terms of just refine some of the points around how can I get better from here. And also, we're emotional people as salespeople and sales leaders. You can get involved in a deal. You can maybe, not see the wood for the trees, that kind of thing, So having a reference to come back to and just break it all down objectively and say, hang on a minute, what should be happening at this point and where are the gaps was really valuable to me. And that was a result of the training and the knowledge that you pick up at that point.
Interesting. So, I do a lot of training. And what you're describing is that whole process. You've probably come across this of becoming conscious of your competence and conscious of where you can improve. And for me, that's the hallmark of a professional, and it's how you go from good to great. It's very, and I appreciate your comments here because I think there's a lot of parallels with how you develop sports people. Anybody can go and play football or whatever. But to become really good at it, you need that ability to be conscious of what you're doing and make decisions. And you also need good coaches around you. You can't do it just by yourself. Because you still love sport, don't you?
A good friend of mine talks about the science and the art of selling.
Nice.
And I think up till that point, I'd had through all those formative experiences, I developed an art for selling, but I didn't understand the science behind it at all.
Right.
And in actual fact, when you look at sport nowadays, particularly the academies, the kids are taught the science very early on. Move this way, receive a ball like this, stand in that position, whatever it may be. This is how you react in the situation. And then they look for the ones that add the art on top at the end. And they're the ones that are the special ones that really get to make it, I think, the science of a skill, be it sales, be it a sport, whatever it may be, I think just gives you the groundwork that you can always come back to. And more importantly, I think for me, as you say, good to great's a good example. But I think if you look at a lot of the best coaches in the world, none of them really were amazing, at what they did. They were all reasonably mediocre, but they knew what was required to make them better. And they knew that from somewhere. And typically it's from the science. And a good coach will help you get better using a recognized science. If you have some artistry on top that you can bring yourself, or some own experiences that can add a little bit of flair, fantastic. That's you can sit that on top.
But what I see there, I mean, I think there is a big parallel that we bring people in as junior salespeople, and they've got some natural talent, and hopefully they're going to work hard. They've learned the lessons that you learned at an early age. And sometimes we just leave it there. We don't give them that training. Or if we do, we kind of cap them there. And, people hide, in my view, around sales as a process. And I get that. But the A players, the real star salespeople, for me, I see them adding that art, that flair, on top of understanding the science. You can't just be a gifted amateur. You have to be a professional. But then and as a manager, how do you get somebody who's good and competent, but then how do you get some of those people to be real A players who are going to do the extraordinary things that we all need them to do? So that's, But I mean, Glenn, we've worked together in a number of different areas, but you do sometimes, you do nurture those A players in the teams that you've run. I don't know if you're conscious of that, and how do you do that? How do you take?
I think first thing you have to want to, right? So there's a story at this time. I think I've told you a couple of times that. So the moment I was introduced to, there's actually a book that says this is how you sell, which I didn't realize existed. Is you suddenly show an interest, or I showed an interest, and you start to care about getting better at selling, and improving your skill and your art. And for me, that's the key ingredient, that the individual still want to do that. I think it's very difficult to coach someone who doesn't want to get better.
Sure.
But secondly, as a coach, as a leader, spotting that and seeing that is absolutely critical. Often I think there's people who want to get better and want to achieve, but maybe just don't have the support and tools to do that. Right. So seeing that is critical. At this point, the story I always tell, having sort of realized there was a way of doing good sales and earning a bit of money, I'd gone into Dixon's to buy myself a new TV, and I stood in the shop for 15 minutes while 3 sales guys stood and chatted amongst themselves. And I knew what TV I wanted to buy. I had the money in my pocket. And no one walked up to me and just had made me feel good about making the purchase and helped me buy, basically. And that's all I wanted. And the fact that nobody came up to me, this is how focused I was at sales at the time. I actually walked out the shop. Because I was so disappointed that no one actually came up to me and actually helped me buy the TV. I just wanted a positive experience. I was about to spend a month's salary on a TV, right? So I just wanted someone to help me buy, and it didn't happen. So I went to another shop. So that's I think caring about this and having the desire to want to improve is critical. I think I talk a lot about. I was going to come on to maybe, what makes a good sales leader. We can do a little bit now if you want. I think for me, it's I think you have to have a degree of empathy. I know a lot of people have talked about empathy on your podcast.
Yeah.
But I think, this is a key area where it demonstrates that, because I think in sales you have to wear many hats at many times.
Sure. Yeah.
So you have to demonstrate an interest in what your customers or whoever you're conversing with at the time is discussing or is important to them.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to put yourself in others' shoes.
Yeah.
And often when I would talk to salesperson, I would try and, as I think someone that worked for me on my team, I would try and put myself in their shoes to understand things from their point of view.
Yeah.
But also, if I was talking to a client, I'd obviously try and put myself in their shoes and understand their point of view. And I had a discussion with one of your prior guests about this, actually. Slight tangent, but we had a great discussion about people that cry at movies and whether they make good salespeople.
Oh, okay.
And hear me out on this.
Yeah, I'm
where we're going with
fascinated.
this. Well, people that cry at movies are often the people that really put themselves in the shoes of the character.
Yeah.
And feel what the character's feeling and really go through the journey with them. And I think as a good salesperson, as a good coach and a good leader, you have to have that level of empathy and really imagine what life is like in that individual's shoes. And when they're having a rough time, you feel like you're having a rough time too.
Yeah.
So hence the crying at movies. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can identify with that.
Yeah.
But can you go too far? Where empathy becomes sympathy, and as a salesperson, you want to really understand the customer. You want to empathize, understand how they're feeling. But you're looking for a win-win, but for them and for you, not just a win for them. So can you go too far, do you think? Do you see salespeople do that, or sales managers do that with salespeople?
Probably. If anyone asks me, what are some of the mistakes you've made in your career, which you may well ask me later on, so maybe
I may well ask
back.
that, yes.
But that would certainly be part of that for me. So maybe we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Are you still doing the 4 styles of coaching?
Yes. Yeah. It's and we cover it in the training that we do, but depending on how would you describe this? This is a test for me whether you remember it.
So okay, should we pause here? So no, I think I was thinking then, in that situation, how would I approach it? And I, like many things, I'd often refer back to a framework. And I think the framework that really worked well for me for a long time was the 4 styles of coaching. So sell, tell, delegative, and participative. Yeah. And unfortunately the IT sales industry that I was part of, but I think many sales industries are flooded with sell, tell sales managers. And it's not surprising, but you have a sales guy that performs really well, top performer. First mistake that's often made is people think progression from being a good IC is to become a sales manager. I don't agree with that. I think they're 2 separate tracks. Because you either have that empathy or you don't, and that's not necessarily an ingredient for a good IC, in my opinion. So an individual contributor, unfortunately, sometimes can be taken down the path of, right, well done for hitting your number for the last 6 or 7 years. We think you'd be a great sales manager, without even considering if they've got the right raw ingredients to be a sales manager. And what happens then is you get a sales manager or sales leader who is used to selling the idea of why we should all go and do something. Hey, you all should join a forecast call on a Monday morning because it's great for you and you're going to earn lots of money. And they try and sell this concept. And of course it doesn't work after a while, as things don't. And then they just get annoyed and frustrated that selling's not working, so they just tell people to do it. And so you just create these sell-tell managers, right? And I'm sorry if I'm teaching you to suck eggs.
No, but you're reinforcing a lot of stuff.
And so that the true areas where you see, for me, growth, particularly in high potential individuals, were the participative areas, but also delegations, incredibly important as well. I think we touched on that earlier. If you have a high performer, don't try and tell them how to do their job. Just let them get on with it, and actually empower them a little bit, and say, look, there's a piece of work over here. I'm not even sure how to approach it. Can you just crack on with that for me, and let me know how you get on? So delegation's critical, but participative is the one that I think suffers an awful amount in the industry that I worked in, and that's because it's time consuming. Sitting down and working through something with someone. Nobody wants to do that when we've both got really busy jobs to do, right? But it is the greatest area of knowledge transfer that I think you can get out of those four areas of the full styles coaching.
And I mean, just for people listening to this, participative style is one where we sit down kind of side by side and work things out. As the manager, you're the sounding board, you can brainstorm with people, and it is time consuming. But often, Glenn, I've found that to be one of the most rewarding areas. The top performer, you get out of the way, you let them do their thing. But working with people who are still trying to figure it out is going to help them, it's going to help you. And that's where you can get some real breakthroughs as well. But it is time consuming. It's interesting. And listeners may want to just reflect on what you've described there as a tell or sell type of management style is very common. People in their first 6, 9, 12 months as a manager, and they either just burn out and that's it, or they learn probably the hard way that it's not the smart way to actually go about things. But it's interesting, for you, you're referring back to models, you're very conscious of that. Presumably your style is very flexible then. You can let some people just get on with it. Other people, I mean, there is a time where you do have to tell or sell.
Cool.
But most people overdo it a huge amount. Okay,
I'm a big believer in finding the win-win on an individual basis. And that takes time, and that takes a flexible approach. But I feel it's the way to get the best out of a team.
Right. You've talked a couple of times about what are the essential qualities for a sales manager, and I've noted down empathy, the ability to delegate, the ability to participate. And you talked earlier around some of those characteristic things. You need a strength of character. And anything else that you look for, or you would question people about when they're maybe aspiring to management?
So you could probably help me. Yeah, you can help me sum this one up, because I'm not quite sure how to label it, if you like. But so we didn't quite finish on my journey, but my journey is slightly unusual in as much as I've been reasonably successful, but I've also been reasonably successful in very adverse conditions. So I've worked for companies through bankruptcy, Chapter 11. Definitely always typically number 2 or number 3 in the market, not the market leader.
Right. Okay.
And actually, thinking about coming back to that point at Nortel, we were faced with this at that point. We were faced with the boom of IP telephony at that point.
Okay.
Which is funny now, right? With us chatting on a Zoom call, and we all use FaceTime and WhatsApp and Teams and what have you. But this was the point when having a phone call go over a data network was new. I was working, not by choice at that point, but I was working for the company who was very much not the leader in that space. I think Cisco had done a genius bit of product strategy or business strategy in terms of educating everyone coming through the universities in their products. So they flooded the market with engineers who are skilled in their product. So was working for the niche player. And actually, if I can got a bit of a tangent before I answer your question, Steve, because it's worth touching on that. So when you are outgunned like this, you're a niche player. The opposition has better marketing, more people, etc. So more partners, etc., etc. We started to really learn the art of ecosystem selling to compete.
Yeah.
And there's actually a couple of lessons out of this. One is, we very much worked what used to be called, we were in London, so it used to be labelled the trader hours. So you were at breakfast with someone at 7:30 in the morning, typically either your manager, a colleague, a customer, or a partner.
Yeah.
You pretty much had your day done by 10 or 11 o'clock. Only after that would you start reacting to stuff, i.e. open your Outlook. It pains me to see people sit at their desk and looking at Outlook at 7:30 in the morning. I think, get your email done after you've got your proactive things out of the way that you want to get done that day. And then you kind of had your day done by 3:30, 4 o'clock, and then you'd go and meet someone, coffee, beer, even during COVID, I've had a Zoom call with someone.
Yeah.
Without a huge amount of objective for that meeting. You'd often go in just conversation and listening mode.
Yeah.
But you were making time for that. And typically that was so I was selling phone systems, right? IP telephony, but it was phone system. It needed a redundant power pack. It needed some voice recording. It might have needed some monitoring. It might have needed some dealer boards if it was in a bank.
Right.
And all these other sales guys were out there all trying to do the same thing. So getting together outside of my day job with these guys and sharing intel suddenly meant that I was part of a much, much bigger army, and I could then compete with someone who didn't need all those things.
Yeah.
So that was a huge lesson out of that. But coming back to your question, that in a company that was number 2, and this is my first experience of this, or even number 3 or 4, what I found was when we got that right, and we had a good story, we had a good product. I think that's important. You have to have that. As a sales guy, you have to have something you can believe in. And we were rewarded really well. And so when I would sit in front of a client and I'd do my thing, or my team would do their thing, 9 times out of 10, I mean, seriously, like 90% win rate, it would go well. Now, that's 9 times out of 10, but really there's another 90 that make up the 100 on top of that we didn't even see, right? That were going away. So our industry is seeing 90 go away from us, but we're seeing 10, we're participating in 10, which is all we could do with the resources we had, and we're winning 90% of them. And what I found was, in an organization like that, when you come back with that level of win rate and you're winning 9 where they're losing 90, you're an absolute hero. You're incredibly seen, listened to, valued, rewarded. And so for me personally, I used to love working, and I found out I loved working for the number 2 or number 3 in the market for that reason. Now, what's interesting was from there is I went to another broken Canadian manufacturer. I went to Blackberry, which was an astonishing experience because, well, it was Research in Motion that I joined. But at the time, Blackberries had the outage. The Blackberry handset was rapidly losing market share. iPhone was out, Android was out, and people would look at me and say, "Why are you going to Blackberry?" But I mean, I went to Blackberry and carried an iPhone, and we'd figured out that we could use the Blackberry network and software to manage any device. Which was really the start of the boom of the mobile device management industry. And what was interesting was when I turned up there, BlackBerry had been number 1, and the sales floor was full of salespeople who had done extremely well in an organization that was number 1. Now they weren't number 1, and they were having some really tough times, and these salespeople were seriously struggling. And when I was told to come in and build a team, so I had to recruit I think 10 guys at the time, 10 people at the time. and none of the salespeople, in my opinion, that were there were fit for the role.
Yeah.
Because they were floundering, because the world had suddenly got a little bit more difficult for them.
Yeah.
And what I did do is I went out and interviewed externally, and it was a really key lesson for me. Was I found candidates, some of them would come and say hello, but I found a lot of candidates simply wouldn't entertain the role because of the brand associated with it.
Right.
They just saw, I don't want to work for Blackberry because I'm not comfortable in going down and meeting for a drink with my friends at the weekend and saying I work for Blackberry. And they couldn't get past it. They really struggled with it. Whereas the people that I ended up recruiting were comfortable in the fact that the product was good, the story was good, get away from the brand, the rewards are strong. And that remains probably one of the strongest sales teams I've ever actually built, because I recruited people who purely had those same beliefs as me and weren't worried about how the company was doing or what the brand looked like or anything like that. They just wanted a good product, be rewarded well, and they weren't fazed by all the noise around the edge. So I don't know what ingredient that is in an individual, but we went from zero to $40 million in 3 years.
Right.
So with a team of 10 of us. So it was phenomenally successful time for me and that team. And some sales guys that came in and I recruited at that point, when they started working for me, had huge financial difficulties. When I left, they were buying a house for cash. It was a phenomenal journey for all of us, which was such a pleasure for me to see. To see, people that work for me come through that way. But I'm still to this day, I don't know how to frame all that and put it into, what ingredients they were that made those people succeed, where others couldn't even see past the issues.
I mean, it just strikes me. That's a fantastic story. But I'm going back to kind of your foundations, coming up, the learnings that you had. There's something maybe about developing in times of adversity. There's something about just being hungry. And sometimes I pity people who work for huge market leaders, because you're going to be relatively successful. It's when times get tough that you figure out, the people who can really do the job. And sometimes we need to have come through those tough times. And as a sales manager, I've sometimes put people into quite tough situations, given them difficult accounts or a difficult territory, whatever, partly for their development, that you have to go through that. So I don't know the answer to how do we articulate that, but it's it is about some characteristics. A lot of talk these days about the grit that's needed to be a good manager, and you only get that grit if you've had to overcome some stuff. So I think there's maybe some of that. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I think so.
Glenn, any bits of the story we're missing? We're going to have to try and summarize this in a few minutes. But we've gone through this amazing career so far.
Well, I know I wanted to touch very, very briefly on, I know one thing you ask is, or has come up in the previous podcast, is around the team leader role. I just wanted to have a quick tangent on that. And that was, again, back to just before Blackberry at Nortel. When it was going through Chapter 11, very, very difficult time. As you say, through adversity comes opportunity. And that was when I was given a team leader role. So I was, but I mean, it's a difficult time, right? There's a lot of redundancies and those sort of side of things. And in fact, one of my first jobs as a team leader was to make some people redundant, right? So it's incredibly difficult time for everybody. But I'm not sure if I would have gone into taken the path I took into the sales leadership I ended up doing if I hadn't been given that opportunity to be a team leader at that point. And team leader, yes, I still carried my own number, but I was just given more responsibilities. I don't think there was too much of an increase in salary and those sort of benefits and those sorts of things. So you do two jobs.
Yeah.
But, I wanted the opportunity to prove myself, and I took it. And for me, without that, I don't know if I would have then got the opportunity to then go to the next role at another company, which was a true sales leadership role. Right.
Interesting. Because, I am nervous about the team leader role often because it is so difficult. Yeah. And I think I've always said for some people it works, but for many people it doesn't. It's because you don't know, are you a manager or not? You said as a team leader you had to make some people redundant, which I mean you were given a lot more management responsibility than most team leaders are given. Because my experience is as a team leader, you're not making people redundant. You're just collating figures, and so it depends how it's specified and how it's managed, I guess. But okay,
I think looking back, I think I was given a manager role, but they didn't want to call me a manager at the time.
Okay.
It was that kind of team leader role. But that, it was, look, go prove yourself was basically how I saw it, and prove to us that you should be a manager. While still carrying accounts, while still being an IC and having my own target. But so for me, I was happy to do that. They got a good deal, right? They had a manager and an IC for one salary. But I got a good deal, and I think the next jump I took, the next role I took, I probably doubled my salary, so it worked out for me.
And I mean, the benefit of it is that you can try it out, and if you figure out it's not for you, or management decide it's not for you, you can kind of just easily move back. And it's because moving to management is a big jump. As you said earlier, we shouldn't talk about it being a promotion. It's a different role, but you're moving from sales to sales management, and that is difficult. So if we were to try and summarize all this, Glenn, I mean, what a fantastic set of experiences you've had. But what would be your 2 or 3 pieces of advice for a new sales manager, somebody who's just been asked to manage a team or whatever? How would you summarize that?
So I think something that's come up again, listening to the other podcasts a lot, is treat your company, your employer, as your customer.
Right.
But I will drill down into a couple of key areas on that, if that's okay, because I think that's just a common consensus, quite rightly so. So I would probably then go into really understand the sales culture of the organisation, if there is one, and really understand your manager. Be it, I've worked for a board, obviously I've worked for a CEO, I've worked for sales leaders, middle managers. I in one of my last roles, I'm working 100 hours. I'm working on coverage models, lead to opportunity conversion rates, obviously sales performance. I'm trying to implement a vertical model at the time, to run verticals. I'm obviously working on growth engines at the front end of things, introducing a sales methodology, all these things I'm doing.
Right.
My direct manager just wanted to know what the top 10 sales deals were.
Okay.
And that was his language, right? And he didn't understand, and he didn't want to understand everything else I was working on. So I would have wasted my time if I'd sat there and taken him through that stuff. So understanding the language and the important things for your particular manager is critical. And I think that probably leads on to the next one. I think that certainly the board or a CEO of an organization can have a huge impact on whether you're in a sales culture or not, a sales first culture or not. And so if you're working for a CEO with sales experience, you generally are. If you're working for an operational or finance CEO, perhaps not so much.
Yeah.
And that will make a huge difference in terms of the behavior and the attitude towards sales from the whole sales organization. So my example of that, or my experience of that, in one organization, was that sales was quite a dirty word.
Okay.
I joined and I kind of looked around, and I could find client partners, I could find account managers and directors, I could find managing directors of accounts. I couldn't find any salespeople, and it just, people hated the word sales.
Yeah.
And I think sales in that company was almost positioned as, the guy who tricked you, the guy who, when you came away from the deal, he'd got something that you wanted, and how you don't know how that happened. It was like a dark art.
Yeah.
So understanding, are you in an account management culture, or are you in a sales culture?
Yeah.
It was really critical. And I think one of the things I'm probably most proud of in that organization was, by the time I left, we'd managed to make it a sales culture, and people being comfortable to say, I am sales. And there's some gravitas around that, and it is a very, very difficult skill, and it requires a huge amount of investment in time to become good at it. And actually done right, it can really benefit the whole of the organization.
Yeah. And you know how I feel about that. Yeah. And that whole thing about sales culture is something we should all be proud of. Okay.
I mentioned a couple of things.
Yeah.
I was going to say, so that was the one on, or the two on the kind of treat your employer as a customer, because obviously if that was your customer, you figure out the culture, and you figure out the CEO pretty quick. But I think the second area is getting the right measurements in place.
Okay.
And this maybe alludes back to what we were talking about with my time at Blackberry as well. So I'm a big believer in the mantra of accountability, predictability, and consistency.
Yeah.
And I know 2 or 3 other of my colleagues who might be listening also stand by that. And I stand by it because I see the real value of salespeople is we can predict the future. I can pay someone 1/10 of the salary I do to a salesperson to tell me what's happened.
Yeah.
What I think is really valuable in the sales team is tell me what's going to happen. And to do that, you have to have a level of accountability in order to be predictable. And to be predictable, you have to be reliably predictable. You have to be consistent.
Yeah.
So the three, accountability, predictability, and consistency, are kind of interdependent. And it's quite unique, because most of the rest of an organization will report, whereas a sales team will forecast.
Yes.
And I think these 3 ingredients are critical to being able to forecast well. And so when I talk about getting your right measurements in place, really understanding your forecast quality and your forecast accuracy, are you really focusing on measuring your forecasting, is critical, and possibly far more critical than, I'll explain what I mean by critical. It's far more important than the reporting of who's sold what. So back to the example I had going to Blackberry, is I had lots of people who are 100% of their number and above. No problem, great. They are obviously our top salespeople. Well, they're not, because in many cases they were telling me what had happened when I asked them. And so having good measurement around forecast quality and forecast accuracy, I think often reveals who your really strong salespeople are, far more than actually who might be top of a league table.
Because there's lots of reasons why numbers come in, particularly if you're a market leader. But to be able to predict it, but also make it happen, rather than just let it happen to you and report on it. But
Yeah.
and that's the accountability piece, I think. And it's the
Yeah.
professionalism of a salesperson versus somebody who just happens to be there and talks to customers and gets orders.
Yeah. I think
Interesting.
I mean, good forecast quality is extremely difficult to get.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
high degree of forecast quality is extreme. So it's constantly seeking, you know, the improvement, I guess.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you ever really get there.
No, and you probably don't want to be, because you need to take some risks, but understand those risks and being able to articulate them. And, you know, particularly if it just comes down to one or two deals at the end of a quarter, you know, being in control of those, predicting it's going to go this way or that way, rather than just, well, I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many parts of good customer interaction that you have to have in place to be able to be accurate and good quality of your forecast. Yeah. So it's just a nice, in terms of being able to give someone advice and 2 points, it's just a nice one to have in place because it catches up so many other things.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Listen, we're going to take a quick break. And then I've just got one or two more questions for you.
Look forward to it.
Bonus question.
So, Glenn, the thing we like to finish on, you know, we all learn from our mistakes. You know, we've talked about developing yourself in adversity, but hopefully we can learn from other people's mistakes. So it'd be great if you could share, you know, what you consider your biggest mistake as a leader, and what you learned from it.
Okay. So again, as you probably picked up from me, Steve, slightly away from the norm. So I'm not going to talk about, you know, a deal I won or you know, actually I mentioned earlier, you know, seeing some of the team seed, you know, there's some of the definitely the proudest moments I've had. But if I go way back, pre-sales, I talked about having a million different jobs.
Right.
And one of those jobs, or as work experience placement, at the time I was thinking about being a PE teacher. And so I talked to you about the coaching basketball to the kids and all the rest of it. We had this situation come up where the kids were going to go away for 2 days, and I think we were somewhere near the coast, and we do lots of activities with them, kayaking and mountain climbing and all this sorts of stuff. And I thought, this is fantastic. I got the opportunity to be one of the teachers with these sort of 30 or 40 odd kids that we were taking away for a couple of days. And I jumped into that. We all get on this coach. We go to wherever this place is. The kids kind of look at me because obviously they know the other 4 or 5, excuse me, they know the other 4 or 5 teachers because they're in the school all the time. They're like, okay, who's this guy? Glenn's just, you know, stand-in teacher for the weekend. Okay, fine. Okay. So I'm the kind of, I'm their new toy, right? You know, they're just like, who are you? What are you? And we arrive at this place, and I'm having great fun with these kids. We're playing football, we're having a laugh, we're having a joke. I'm, you know, because they're all over me because I'm the new shiny thing. So I have a fantastic afternoon with these kids, and I feel like I'm back in school again. These great kids, lovely children, playing football with them, fantastic. We then go for dinner. I'm chatting with the other teachers, and we're talking about the kids and sort of saying who's who and all the rest of it. And I could see, actually, when I was at that dinner table with the other teachers, all the other kids that I've been playing football with are kind of looking over and thinking, well, why is he sat with them and not with us? And we're talking about the kids. So now the kids are sitting there and thinking, oh, they're now talking about us. Why is our mate Glenn, you know, that we play football with, why is he doing that? And after dinner, it was time for the kids to call it a night, and we're away from home, so some of them are a little bit nervous around, you know, going off to bed, and so they're making excuses, they're coming up with all sorts of reasons why they don't have to call it a night, right? And they've had a great afternoon. And so very kindly, the teachers, who've probably opened a bottle of wine at this point, turn around to me and say, "Oh, can you go and deal with Tom or Josh or whoever it is and make sure he goes to bed, please." And of course, I'm going into this dorm with 30 odd kids, and no one's listening to a word I've got to say, because I'm just the fun guy that plays football with them. And when I say, "No, guys, right, books down now, lights off, time to go to bed." No, I'm being serious. Yeah. And I just completely got the line wrong.
Yeah.
And I was just very much in the territory of being Glenn the best mate as opposed to Glenn the teacher.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of 18, I think, at this point. So I've not got any management experience, but I will never forget that lesson. Never forget that lesson. And I had to, because it was a 2-day thing. I then spent the next day trying to claw back and try and regain the teacher role, which does more damage because then they're going, well, what happened to the guy yesterday?
Yeah.
And so knowing where that line is of being part of the team or being the guy that's running the team or managing the team or leading the team is very difficult. And I think I definitely got wrong on my first attempt at it.
Okay. I mean, it's another fascinating story, but as you were telling it, I'm just thinking of lots of experiences of sales management where, it is exactly the same, because there is that line, and you want to be part of the team to a certain extent, but at the same time, you're not. And whether you like it or not, they will treat you differently. And getting that right. And I think a lot of new sales managers, I've talked to a lot of them about the transition, which takes 6, 12, 18 months, whatever. And a lot of it is figuring out that kind of positioning and your mindset. But that just illustrates it really well.
Well, I think if that was my biggest mistake, maybe I would claim my biggest success would be actually, getting that right towards the end of my career. I think certainly every manager goes through I want to be the best manager, and all you focus on is being a manager. So you kind of maybe withdraw a little bit too much in that period. I certainly did that.
Yeah.
I think you then probably overcorrect and overkill to the other way.
Yeah.
Finding that line, I probably only figured out in the latter years of my career. But when you do, it's a beautiful place and very enjoyable.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, again, we try and help new managers with advice and models and research and stuff, but you have to figure it out for yourself. It's emotional as well as that there are skills. It's not something that I can say, here's a training module on how to get it right. It's you have to go through it and want to go through it yourself.
Yeah,
my
absolutely.
goodness. Well, listen, that's quite deep, Glenn. We're going to have to finish it on that note. Can I just say thank you ever so much? You've been incredibly open. It's been a really nice story or series of stories, but just so much that I think all of us can reflect on. I've certainly reflected and think, that really helps me to understand all these different situations.
You're welcome. And I'll put my details out there. If people want to reach out for a bit of coaching, a bit of advice, then obviously come through yourself, and very happy to help.
Yeah, no, we'll put all your details on the show notes that go out with this. Excellent. And there's a lot of things we didn't cover, so maybe we'll have another conversation at some stage.
Yeah, I'd love that. Look forward to that.
All right. But on that note, thanks ever so much. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Steve. Take care.
If you're an aspiring new or developing sales manager in complex business to business, or you know of someone who is, you may want to go to www.realsalesmanager.com to learn about our unique blend of training and coaching to help aspiring sales managers to decide if it's right for them and how to go about getting a job, to help new sales managers get as effective as possible, as quickly as possible, and to help developing sales managers with a personalised program to improve specific skills.